This is the first session in our brand new Be Well, Learn Well Staff Professional Development series, which will explore the science and research behind the Be Well Charter and look at how they relate to learning. We will be building on this content throughout this year and next, and we want it to be something collaborative and co-created with you. Your feedback, therefore, is critical to us for three reasons. Firstly, to inform us of what you want, need, and find helpful. Secondly, to build a bank of recommendations and tricks and tips based on neuroscience that you are going to try in your classrooms that we can share with our global community. And finally, to give staff who would like to be more involved in the development of this programme in the future the opportunity to indicate their interests. So it now gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Bettina Honan, clinical psychologist, author, educator, and co-founder of the podcast Incredible Conversations, and Sir Kevin Collins, a member of the board of Cognita, providing strategic oversight for our educational objectives, former head of the Education Endowment Foundation, but I think I'm right in saying the proudest job title you hold is that of teacher. The bottom line is, we know from the Be Well Charter why these contributors are critical to well-being. The next step for us is to have a deeper dive into why they are so important to well-being and learning within a school environment. And what I mean by that is from the minute they walk into the school gates, every part, not just in a classroom environment. Bettina, before we start, could you please just outline a couple of key concepts from the neuroscience that you think will form the background for our session today?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two really fundamental aspects of how the brain functions and develops that I think are really helpful just to know and just to remember. So the first one is that well-being and learning are intertwined. Yeah. And if we look at the neural circuitry in the brain for emotions and for learning, they are actually linked. So it's quite a crude model of the brain in a way, but I think it's a really helpful one to divide the brain into two groups of structures. So the lower region is known as the limbic region, and it is fundamental in the brain. It guides us towards what's important to us, so kind of motivation, and away from things that may be harmful, so i.e. things that might be a threat. And the cortex is the thinking brain, which is the bit that goes over the top, and that is where we kind of that's where the learning happens and we make good decisions. But there's a bit of a kind of pull and push between these two parts of the brain, and actually fundamentally the lower brain works to direct our behaviour. So survival is kind of, and seeking goals is of primary importance in the brain. So they get the first pick in a way at the metabolic energy. So Paul Gilbert describes three kind of regulating systems in the lower part of the brain. One is to do with safety. So we need to feel safe in order to enable us to explore and engage. And safety comes from the relationships and from the kind of school context. The second one is motivation. And we engage our prefrontal cortex, that's at the front of our brain, much more easily when we're motivated. And we can easily see that with children. And then the third one is to do with threat. And studies have shown that there is reduced blood flow in this higher part of the brain when somebody is in a highly emotional state. So it might be any form of very strong emotion. Yeah. So I think that's really important as a primary kind of idea about brain functioning that is going on every day. Yeah. The other thing I think is really helpful to think about is there's something called windows of opportunity for learning. So we know that the brain develops over this period of about 25 years, but different regions of the brain mature in this kind of ordered sequence. So the child is ready to make the most of particular learning experiences at different times. So different parts of the cortex are primed to make these really strong neural connections at different times. So it's really helpful. I mean, I think it's obvious when you think about when children learn to walk, for example, suddenly there's a period of time, isn't it, when they get up and they are determined to walk, and they will get up and they will fall over and often 100 times a day, and they'll hurt themselves and bruise themselves, but it's like there's something driving them towards that activity. We know that that actually goes on throughout the whole of development. So in particular, a lot of the brain science on the teenage brain recently has helped us to understand that teenagers are driven towards certain aspects of their environment, like peers and like, self-identity that we'll talk about today, because at the same time that those parts of the brain are ready for development. So this kind of developmental model, and you'll see there's a slide coming up now, and it shows a brain scan over the age range. So the darker bits of the brain, the blue bits are more mature, and the lighter bits are less mature. And that's to help you to think about the different focuses at the different times in development.
So that's really helpful to have that context set up, Tina, so thank you. Now, we have identified through our Be Well Charter the contributors that are really important to well-being, but we're now going to look at the science that explains how well-being and learning fit together. And then we're going to ask you in your breakout groups to reflect on what you've heard and consider how it could apply in your environments. And we will group the physical and the mental contributors together in 2 separate videos.